Peter, a bearded and silent fisherman from the north, woke up before dawn. His old cottage by the shore smelled of fish, sea salt and smoke from the stove. He put on a warm sweater, took a thermos with strong tea and went to the shore, where a wooden boat, Snow Gull, was waiting for him. The sea was calm. The icy water barely rippled under the morning wind. Peter knew these waters like the back of his hand. More than once he had gone on solo fishing trips for several days, and each time he returned with a rich catch in sea tails. Today he was going farther out than usual. The weather promised to be clear, the sky clear. He checked the motor, food supplies, compass, maps. Everything was ready. The boat left the bay and soon disappeared into the blue morning fog. Peter sat quietly, smoking a pipe and watching the sun rise above the horizon. In his heart he felt that something would be wrong today. But he pushed that feeling away. It was just another day of fishing. He didn't know that this fishing trip would change everything. And would be the beginning of a challenge like he'd never known before. In the evening, the sea suddenly became heavy and disturbing. First there was a cold wind, then the sky darkened, as if someone had poured ink on the clouds. Peter frowned, the forecast had not predicted such a change in the weather. He was about to turn back, but it was too late. The storm swept over the boat like a beast. The waves became walls, the wind roared in his ears. Peter struggled to steer, holding on with all his might, but the ocean wouldn't give way. The engine stalled, the compass went astray. In a moment he did not know where north was, where the shore was, where the end of this nightmare was. Water was pouring into the boat. He scooped it out with his hat, tied up his gear, and pulled his life jacket up to his shoulders. Lightning flashed across the sky, revealing the raging abyss around him. With each passing minute he was being carried farther out to the open sea. The night passed in fear and struggle. Peter did not sleep for a second. With every stroke of the wave he felt his familiar world disappear and something wild and unknown begin. In the evening, the sea suddenly became heavy and disturbing. First there was a cold wind, then the sky darkened, as if someone had poured ink on the clouds. Peter frowned, the forecast had not predicted such a change in the weather. He was about to turn back, but it was too late. The storm swept over the boat like a beast. The waves became walls, the wind roared in his ears. Peter struggled to steer, holding on with all his might, but the ocean wouldn't give way. The engine stalled, the compass went astray. In a moment he did not know where north was, where the shore was, where the end of this nightmare was. Water was pouring into the boat. He scooped it out with his hat, tied up his gear, and pulled his life jacket up to his shoulders. Lightning flashed across the sky, revealing the raging abyss around him. With each passing minute he was being carried farther out to the open sea. The night passed in fear and struggle. Peter did not sleep for a second. With every stroke of the wave he felt his familiar world disappear and something wild and unknown begin. After eating, Peter returned to the boat, which, though damaged, still served as a shelter from the wind. He covered himself with a sealskin, pulled it up to his chin, and tried to sleep. But the cold was merciless. During the night, the temperature dropped sharply. The wind howled like a beast, the drafts penetrated even through the tight folds of the fur. Peter's fingers were cramping. He wrapped himself more tightly, hid his face, breathed into his palms, but it was all in vain. Sleep came intermittently, full of disturbing images. On the fourth night, hallucinations appeared. He saw his mother standing at the threshold of her home with a steaming bowl of soup. Then he saw his father calling him back to his childhood, to a warm stove and fishing stories. Then the sea fog thickened, and among the waves he saw a huge figure like an ancient sea spirit. He awoke in a panic, trembling all over his body. A prayer, quiet, confused, escaped his parched lips. Lord, do not forsake. Let there be light tomorrow. He didn't need an answer. He just needed to live to see the morning. The calm lasted only 2 days, and then the wind came again. The boat crackled under the pressure of the waves. The cold spray hit his face like needles. Peter tried to hold on, to row, to steer, but it was all in vain. A white wall grew in front of him, an ice edge that looked like a mountain. With a rumble, as if the earth itself had cracked, the boat hit the ice. Peter flew off, hit the side, and everything sank in noise and darkness. He did not remember how he had gotten into the water. The icy water penetrated to the bone. He floundered until he found solid ground beneath his feet the shore. The ocean spit him out like a wreck. He lay on the snow, shivering, barely breathing, until his body stopped listening. It was not until many hours later, near evening, that he struggled to rise and looked around. A stark, snow-covered island spread out before him. No tracks, no smoke, no signs of life. Just wind, snow, and stillness. He was alone again. But once again he was on land. The snow crunched under his feet. Peter, wrapped in an icy sealskin, wandered around the island step by step. He was looking for something: dry branches, animal tracks, the shadow of a shelter. His hands were numb with cold. He remembered how his father had once taught him to gather birch bark. Even wet, it could catch fire. There were no birches here, but he found a few pieces of bark that had been washed ashore, and the wreckage of a crate, perhaps evidence of someone else's shipwreck. He made a small fire out of the stones, and, sparing the last matches, tried to make a fire. On the third attempt, the flame burst into flame. The small, quivering fire became the center of the world. On the second day, deeper in the rocks, he found an ice cave. It wasn't warmer there, but the wind didn't get there, and the snow lay soft as a pillow. He made himself a bed of sealskin, and strengthened the entrance by covering it with a piece of canvas from the boat. Now he had a shelter. Not a home. But hope. The morning was strangely quiet. Even the wind seemed tired. Peter, warmed by the night fire and a refreshing sip of melted water, left the cave and walked along the edge of the cliffs. It was then that he saw them, the tracks. They were barely visible, as if pressed into the snow many days ago. Human. Or maybe old. But they were there. And they led forward. His heart beat faster. He followed the tracks, keeping his eyes on them. The minutes dragged on like hours. His hands trembled not only from the cold, but also from waiting. And then, around the corner of the cliffs, he saw it. A cabin. Low, gray, with a sagging roof on one side. The wind creaked in the boards. But it was a real house. He ran up, opened the door, and held his breath. Inside was a stove, rusty but intact. In the corner, a couple of logs, dried rags, an old bucket. On the wall hung a picture of a hunter and his husky. Everything was covered with the dust of time, but still alive. Peter sank down on the bench as if he had entered a temple. He lit the fire in the stove, hearing the wood crackle. And for the first time he felt that he could survive. At first Peter just slept. Several hours in a row, snuggled up to the fireplace, to the sound of the fire. When he woke up, he felt the pain leaving his muscles, the warmth returning to his fingers. He carefully hung the sealskin over the stove as it dried slowly, emitting the pungent odor of the sea. From the pieces of fur he sewed something like a cape and mittens. The threads were replaced by scraps of rope, and the needle was a pointed nail. He began to survey his surroundings. The island was not so big, but full of surprises. He found a stream frozen on the surface, but with living water under the ice. He found a place where someone had once hunted. There were rusty traps, an empty stew box, even the wreckage of a radio receiver. He returned to the cabin with a load of what he had found, like a primitive man bringing gifts to his dwelling. Every day he felt stronger, more collected. He was no longer a victim of nature. He had become part of it. The morning was strangely unsettling. The air was dense, as if the island itself were holding its breath. Peter stepped out of the cabin to gather some ice for water and froze. Right at the entrance, some 20 meters away from him, stood a polar bear. Huge as a myth. The snow beneath his paws was dented, his breath steaming out into the frosty sky. The bear stared at him without growling, without moving, as if it too was assessing who was before it, prey or threat. Peter slowly retreated to the cabin. He knew there would be no second chance. He had one cartridge left. He put it in the gun, stood by the door, waiting. The bear approached. And the moment it stepped on the threshold, Peter fired. The shot rumbled across the island like thunder. The bear collapsed right at the entrance. Peter stood for a moment, not believing what had happened. Then he sat down, leaning against the wall, and for the first time in many days he cried. From relief, from fatigue, from loneliness. He stripped the carcass. It was meat, food for weeks to come. It was fur, warmth. And most importantly, he knew now, he could survive. Even in the wildest land. After the encounter with the bear, there was a strange calmness. Peter no longer felt panic. He realized that the island was now his home. Temporary? Maybe. But home. He began to strengthen the cabin, he sealed the cracks, reinforced the entrance with planks from the wreckage of the boat, wrapped the walls with sealskin and bear fur. Now the wind no longer howled through the gaps, and the heat from the stove stayed inside longer. He made torches out of bear fat, using old cloth and leftover tin cans. They burned dimly, but long, and gave a cozy feeling. The cabin glowed like a beacon of hope in the middle of the snowy desert. He began writing on the wall with a knife, drawing days, events, his thoughts. It became his calendar. His voice in his loneliness. Peter often thought he felt like Robinson Crusoe, only among snow and ice instead of palm trees and sand. But he even liked it. He, like that hero, survived. Only instead of Friday he had white fog and bird tracks in the snow. The sky was particularly clear. Peter stepped out of the cabin and, squinting into the sun, noticed a dot on the horizon. It was moving. Slowly, but surely. It was an icebreaker. He rushed to his sheltered stockpile, kindling, leftover wood, grease. He molded the fire as he built a house, with desperation and hope. When the fire flared up, he threw everything that burned into it. Black smoke rose into the sky. Day 22. The ship slowly approached. At one point, it changed course, heading straight for the island. It was spotted. Day 23. A team landed on the ice. People in brightly colored jackets, with walkie-talkies, surprised and stunned. Peter stood wrapped in furs, like a hero from another time. They did not immediately believe that he was a man, not a ghost. He smiled, for the first time in a long time. Day 24. He was evacuated. Hot food, showers, dry clothes, it all seemed like a dream. He spoke little. But there was one emotion on his face, gratitude. Day 25. Peter returned to the village. People gathered at the pier as if for a celebration. He had become a legend. They wrote about him in the newspapers, called him on television. But he just wanted quiet, the sea and his old house. Sometimes he looks north and smiles. He knows he's won.